So I just saw Beau is Afraid, and I think it is genuinely brilliant. I also think that most people will not share that sentiment, and I'm hoping this will be the most pretentious line in the review, but it could all be downhill from here, we'll see. You may know that Beau is Afraid was directed by Ari Aster, whose previous works include Hereditary and Midsommar. And as much as I'd like to say if you enjoyed those movies you'll enjoy this one as well, that may not be the case. It all depends on how comfortable you as an audience member are with the concepts of abstraction and surrealism. At the risk of sounding like a liberal arts student, it seems like more and more people these days are adopting the mindset that every story must be interpreted as literally as possible, regardless of genre, where symbolism, thematic imagery, or even mild ambiguity are seen as questions that require a definitive answer. And if there is no answer, or if the answer requires a non-zero level of engagement from the audience, the story is seen as pretentious and self-indulgent. For every film that even dares to flirt with interpretive imagery, there's an inevitable wave of derisive mockery, looking to drown out any semblance of genuine discussion surrounding a film's more ambiguous elements. People who view abstraction and symbolism not as threads to tug at and unravel, but as band-aids to cover a writer's incompetence. An admittance of failure in the writer's ability to communicate their story while maintaining the audience's sense of disbelief. People who view the act of interpretation not as an invitation to explore a story's themes and ideas through their own lived experiences, but as a pretentious mechanism abused by writers in order to engage in gratuitous self-flagellation. Oh, cool, so it is all downhill from here. And on the other hand, you have the opposite extreme. People who are more accepting of ambiguity in a story, but view it less as an imaginative and analytical exercise, and more as a puzzle to be definitively solved, where anything that cannot be theorized into a moderately definitive answer is at best something to be ignored completely, and at worst an outright plot hole. The types of people who make ending explained videos and say shit like Walter White is still alive or brainstorm Annihilation sequels. If anyone tells you they know exactly what happened to Tony Soprano, they are not to be trusted. Now, I'm not saying that film theories aren't fun, and I don't think MatPat is the devil, but to view movies or storytelling in general through either of these perspectives puts a hard ceiling on your ability to interpret and digest a story. And if you try to watch Beau is Afraid through either of these critical perspectives, that ceiling is gonna hit you in the face real quick. And the reason I get so up in arms when people speak derisively about this more surrealistic style of storytelling is that writing a genuinely compelling surrealist narrative is actually really fucking hard. There's a very delicate balance you have to strike between giving concrete nuggets of information that the viewer can form their interpretations around, and creating imagery evocative enough to spark the audience's imagination so that they'll want to engage with the story in the first place. A good example of this would be something like Pink Floyd's The Wall, because it too is a film that uses abstraction as a way to transition between wildly disparate imagery and tell a story with a greater emphasis on the actual ideas it wants to explore rather than the method through which it communicates them. The Wall clearly tells us that the protagonist Pink had a negative experience in primary school, lost his father during World War II, and currently works as a musician. But the majority of the film's imagery is less concerned with the material events of the story and more about how Pink as a character feels about them and how they've influenced him as a person. In much the same way, Beau is Afraid also gives snippets of concrete information that we can use to inform how we interpret the story as it plays out. But what's so compelling to me about this story is that Ari Aster has layered these narrative crumbs in such a way that even the more definitive elements of the story can be interpreted in multiple ways. It's been a while since I've seen a movie where every single character is, in their own way, an unreliable narrator. It turns the story into this winding tapestry of conflicting, biased recollections that sows distrust and anxiety with each creeping minute. As a character, it's difficult to discern whether Beau is a helpless victim who has been taken advantage of since the moment he was born, or a coward who weaponizes his own indecision as a way of passing the blame for his unremarkable life. Are the events of the story a fragmented distortion of how Beau views the world around him, or how the world views Beau? Is the story meant to condemn him, defend him, or serve as a passive investigator, collecting the pieces pieces of Beau's life and laying them out before the court to be judged. And if that is the case, is the court itself impartial or biased? Does it even matter? Now at this point you may be looking at the word review in this video's title and wondering when the fuck that might be coming. And the reason this review might seem so unfocused is that I simply can't approach this film the way I might a more traditional story without feeling dishonest. Normally I discuss things like the acting, cinematography, sound design, but they're all done admirably, so going into them in detail feels redundant. You don't need me to tell you that Ari Aster knows how to make a movie. The craftsmanship is obvious and not the point of contention for most people. As a surrealist piece of fiction, the story was always going to be the battleground for online discussion. The common criticisms I've seen for Beau is Afraid are that it's incomprehensible, confusing, and pretentious. These are criticisms that unfortunately crop up around any film that dares to ask for anything more than the bare minimum investment from its audience. And Beau is Afraid is admittedly a hard film to watch, not just because it's 3 hours long, but because it requires the viewer to consistently be evaluating and interpreting the story's imagery on the fly to avoid becoming overly disoriented. Even once the movie ends, there's still a decent amount of thinking and mulling over required to form a basic comprehension of the film's themes and ideas. And I'm frustrated because this film has genuine shortcomings and flaws that I'd love to tear apart and be a real asshole about, but in an age where so much of our entertainment feels disposable and hollow, when a film like Beau is Afraid gets this much mainstream attention, I'm hesitant to say them out loud, because I really don't want to be lumped in with people who hate films like this on principle. Just as limitation can be a breeding ground for creativity, unlimited freedom can also salt the earth of a creative mind. When you have the budget and clout to do whatever you want, ironically it can have a tremendously negative effect on an artist's ability to hone their raw creativity into making their work the best it can possibly be. The second people stopped telling George Lucas to shut up, Star Wars got worse. And part of the reason I'm so impressed with this film is that Beau is Afraid feels like an unknown number of people lost the power to tell Ari Aster no, and the result is entrancing. Admittedly, I do think there are segments of the movie that did seem to get away from him a bit, but that's also just an occupational hazard of writing a surrealist narrative in the first place. For as many points where you can see Ari Aster expressing clear thematic intent in the story, there are just as many where it seems like he was just riding the wave of each scene and seeing where it happened to end up. And while I do have criticisms for some of these scenes, these missteps also contribute to the nightmare-like haze that permeates each moment of the story. Ari Aster is a director who seems to understand that there's a fine line between writing a good story and an entertaining story, and I have nothing but respect for a writer who is willing to make creative decisions for the sake of their story at the cost of mainstream appeal. Beau is Afraid is a film that asks for a significant amount of investment from its audience, whether that involves active engagement and on-the-fly interpretation during its runtime, or pondering its thematic imagery and symbolism after the credits have rolled. It's a movie that demands your attention to get the most out of it. And whether you like this movie or not will depend on whether or not it earns your investment. I personally found it engrossing and happily saw it twice in theaters, but I can't guarantee you'll have the same response to it. Again, it all depends on your personal approach to how you consume stories. And as much as I tried not to make this next line sound really douchey, if you view movies and storytelling solely as avenues for entertainment, this movie may frustrate you. But if you're the type of person whose YouTube watch history is entirely 4 to 5 hour video essays, it may still frustrate you. To put it simply, Beau is Afraid is a kaleidoscope of storytelling, equal parts Rorschach test and cloud watching. Ask 10 people what they think it means, and you'll likely get 10 different answers. It's unsettling, weird, but mostly it feels like someone told a really creative person they could make whatever they wanted. You won't really know if you'll enjoy this movie until you've seen it, but at the very least I can guarantee you're in for a ride. As for the final score, if I were scoring this from my usual ivory tower of movie criticism, I'd probably give it a high 7 to a low 8, but considering how utterly raw and frantic and wonderfully disorienting my initial viewing was, a 9 seems most appropriate. I am biased as hell for this flavor of storytelling, and I think Ari Aster and his crew did a phenomenal job. Warts and all, I love this movie, and I can't wait to see it again.